Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
Hey Henry, it's going well. Happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah, happy holidays indeed. I'm also joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how is it going?
It's going good, Henry. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy end of the year.
Yes. Yeah. Today is December 22nd, 2022. And yeah, kind of crazy, but we are at the end of the year once again. And you know what that means? It's time to recap the year 2022. We're going to review the year and talk a little bit about the worst and the best TV shows and movies. You can catch the Comic Sauce Podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Comic Sauce Pod. Okay, so just a little disclaimer. In the past, we have included comics in our year in review, but we were thinking in the interest of time, we would leave comics out of it this time around, and perhaps we'll do a comics special episode, all comics. So stay tuned for that. Today, we're going to focus on shows and movies. So let's get right to it. We can start with shows, yeah, television shows. There was a whole lot of TV content this year. Too much, you might say. But let's run it down. I don't think we're going to get super formal today. We can kind of spitball some of our favorites and some of our least favorites. Maybe we'll start with the good. What were some of your favorite TV shows of the year? How about you, Porfirio? You want to kick us off here? What were some of your favorites?
Yeah, so definitely one of my favorites was Andor on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one follows Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna. It's a prequel to Rogue One, and it's basically the show's about like him, the character like before he joined the rebellion, like who he was and his early starts, and just getting to know the character a little bit more outside of Rogue One. And what I loved about the show was that it existed in the Star Wars universe, but wasn't tied in with like the Star Wars drama that we usually see in the films. The whole Skywalker drama, Darth Vader, and all this stuff. And it gave just like a side storyline between the Empire and the Rebels. Something that as terms of like side storyline, something that was done like with the Mandalorian. And I just thought this film was really great because I think like we as in like any kind of media form, we haven't seen like a close up in look at like that life between the rebels and the empire. We've just seen them as like good and evil, but we don't see like the complexities between the two sides. And I just thought that was something. The writing was just freaking phenomenal. Diego Luna's performance was good, and all the cast and crew on that show was just like mwah. And it's so good that they even got a nomination by the Golden Globes next year. So um it was a good show. Definitely one of my faves.
There you go. Yeah. Andor was definitely one of my favorite shows of the year as well. I guess we should give a disclaimer for spoiler alerts. I don't think we're gonna go too deep in on any one show or movie, but we might let loose the occasional plot spoiler, etc. So spoiler alert. Did you get a chance to finish Andor, Christian?
No, I still haven't yet. I've been a little slower on Andor. I've seen about a couple episodes now. As you could say, I'm currently watching it, and I do actually really like it. It does feel a lot different. It feels way slower. A lot of people said that about it, but like even with what people have been saying about Andor, it's something I did like really notice that kind of even I was still a little taken aback, like, whoa, this is a lot slower than I expected. And a lot of talking, a lot of build up, a lot of world building. I don't mind that it's
Mhm.
slower. I'm not saying that it's a point against it. It's just, I guess, a lot different from, your usual, the last few Disney plus Star Wars shows, Boba Fett and Kenobi, which we might talk about a little more later, where they had very consistent action beats throughout, whereas this really didn't. And but I actually really like the way it kind of introduced the characters, and like I guess from what all I've seen, Andor, he was like, I think he's searching for his sister, and um you also get to see like the Empire kind of go about their business. It
Mhm.
feels like,
Yeah.
and so that's something I have liked it. Although like I said, I've been like very slow to pick it back up and like really binge it, so to speak.
All good. Understandable too, because like we've already been saying, there's a lot of content out there. So there's a lot to watch. Um, but yeah, I would highlight the point that slow does not automatically mean bad. In fact, a lot of times slow can mean good. With Andor, it's all good, I think, because yes, it's a little bit slower paced than your typical Star Wars fare, but in a really good way, I think. If a show is slow, but it's slow because it's building a compelling story and it's developing characters properly, then slow is great. you know yeah, especially with the character development. I found myself really caring about these characters. Like, I really cared about what was going to happen. I really wanted to know. And it made the faster parts, the action parts of the show, that much more compelling. The stakes were higher, and
Mhm.
yeah, I really really enjoyed this season. um Definitely one of my top picks for TV of the year. Hey, as long as we're at it, maybe we'll talk about the other um Star Wars releases a bit. We got the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? um what do you guys think of these shows? Were either of these on your best of the year?
Hmm. Not really, no. I was actually Boba Fett was actually might have been it was actually like kind of in my worst of the year list.
Mm-hmm.
I actually found I guess we'll start with Boba Fett now that I've kind of dropped that. Uh so uh it was, which is probably also the reason I think I've been a little slow on Andor, because I think the way I kind of felt about those two series. I think with Boba Fett, it felt like kind of it was too much of a mess. It was a little too all over the place, I think. And it feels like a lot of what you want out of Boba Fett, you kind of get from the Mandalorian, the bounties, the bounty missions, the like the ultra serious badass. Like, whereas with Boba Fett, um, it's all about him trying to become a crime lord in Mos Eisley, but you never really get to see him do much crime. He seems a little too good for the hardened, you know, badass that we kind of see that captures Han Solo in Episode 5. Where and I
Yeah.
think it. you can tell the show's bad when the best episode doesn't actually feature Boba Fett, the Mandalorian. Like it completely shifts into a Mandalorian show in the last 2 to 3
Mhm,
episodes. And I think when it
mhm.
actually gets back to Boba Fett, you kind of realize you really don't care that much about what's going on, and you'd rather see what happens to Mando and Grogu.
Yes,
Yeah,
good call. What about you,
yeah,
Porfirio?
going off what Christian said, yeah, Boba Fett is definitely, I feel like, one on my like worst list. And everything Christian said, like I just want to echo and say, yeah, like the best episodes were like when Mandalorian, Grogu, Ashoka, Luke Skywalker was in it, and yeah, it was basically Boba Fett was just like Mandalorian season 2.5,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think it was, yeah, the second part of the season I enjoyed more because yeah, like the first one, um, yeah, I guess like what Christian said, like you expect Boba Fett to be like kind of like this new gangster in town with Jabba the Hutt gone, but he's like totally trying to be like this like I don't know, kind of like bridge between worlds, between like the gangster world and like society, that it just doesn't feel like it just feels like an impossible task, and yeah, it's just not believable. That, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. No.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's funny. We're just starting the conversation here, and we were supposed to be talking about the best shows of the year, but here we are talking about Book of Boba Fett, and we're all shitting on it. And I'm with you guys. And man, I'll say it outright. The Book of Boba Fett is my pick for worst TV show of the year, period. I think it was garbage. And I agree with everything you guys just mentioned. I would add too that the character Boba Fett is great. I love Boba Fett from the original Star Wars trilogy. And you're kind of getting everything you don't want in this show from Boba Fett, right? So in the original trilogy, he's this badass mercenary. He's very mysterious, right? He has very little screen time. But when you do see him, he looks super cool. You never see his face. He's got his helmet on the whole time. He doesn't say a whole lot. And he's a man of action, right? When you do see him, he doesn't say much, and usually he's fighting, right? So there was always that air of mystery, right? And I think they kind of fucked this up the way that the prequel movies fucked up the Anakin Skywalker character, right? Because Darth Vader was like that too, right? He was this mysterious, badass looking dude, this man machine that you didn't know, what was like hidden under that black helmet of his and his cape, right? But then, you got what you didn't want out of Anakin Skywalker in the prequels. You got Anakin Skywalker as a cute little kid. Like, who wants to see that? And then you got Anakin Skywalker as the whiny ass teenager. No one wants to see that shit. And in that exact same vein, in this show, like, I want to see the mysterious badass bounty hunter Boba Fett. I don't want to see a fat old bald dude in his underwear, but I sure as hell got a lot of that in this fucking show. And yeah, no one needs to see that. And I got turned off of this show real early on. And yeah, I don't want to say outright it was completely terrible. I thought the very end was kind of fun, like that big action finale where everyone shows up and everything kind of gets tied together. I was all right. But yeah, that's the bottom line. Like, this is the show about Boba Fett that you don't want to see. Like, I almost wish I had never seen this show, because then Boba Fett would still be this, mysterious bad motherfucker character, right? So it's kind of unfortunate, but there you have it. All right. So as long as we're at it, maybe we'll talk briefly about Obi-Wan Kenobi, the other Star Wars series that came out this year. Like a lot of people were talking about this one, good and bad, I think, positive and negatively. What'd you guys think? Any quick thoughts on Obi-Wan?
Obi-Wan, I don't know if I would put this in my worst or bad, because I totally forgot that I watched it. So that's not a good sign. But it wasn't bad. Like, I definitely like those action scenes, like between like Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, and seeing kind of like Princess Leia in action, because then it totally kind of tied into like the prequels and that relationship that they had. But it wasn't good either. Like, I was just kind of like, at the end of the day, I was just like, why make this series? Like, what, like, compared to like Andor, why they made it? Like, Andor's not a big character in the Star Wars universe as compared to what Obi-Wan is. But Andor, like, it had a good storyline, and like, kind of helped like explain who this character is and helped it fit within the Star Wars universe storyline. Whereas Obi-Wan, like he's already like a figure in the prequels and the OG series. Um, but I feel like there was just no like uh reason to like why this show was made, like no in-depth to the character. And for me, it was just pretty forgettable. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because the action scenes are fucking awesome, I will say, between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, but that's it.
Yeah, definitely in the same boat. Um, I I'd say good and bad. It's a good way to describe it. Like, I think there's one scene in there that kind of encapsulates everything I feel. This was in a later episode, so this might be a bit of a spoiler. Um, I forget which episode specifically this is, but it might be the one before the last one where Obi-Wan and company are trying to get away from the Empire. They're kind of trapped, and so they get into a ship and they're trying to fly away, but they almost make it in time, but Darth Vader shows up and just force grabs the ship in midair. And I'm thinking like, while this is going on, I'm thinking like, holy fuck, this is awesome. This is so badass. Darth Vader pulls the ship down, rips open like the doors to try to find them, and no one's inside. It's a decoy ship, and the other ship and another ship flies away that we didn't see previously. And I thought that was fucking stupid. What was that? Like, it feels like it has one moment where you're like, this is awesome, and then another where you just kind of shake your head, you know? Like,
It's like, what the fuck happened?
yeah, exactly. Like, it feels like for every like awesome moment, there's like one or two like steps back, that just kind of make you
Yeah.
scratch your head.
Yeah, especially like going out that scene that you're talking about, Christian. There's that one moment where I forgot her name, but the one who holds the crazy red lightsaber, where she like hesitates also, and then like when like Darth Vader does stop doing his thing, then she like tries to attack him. Whereas like, why didn't you just attack him when he was like doing like the force grab, you know?
Mhm. And that would have been a much better idea, because then you didn't have to have the decoy ship. The ship would have gotten away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's such a better idea.
Yeah. You can't think too logically with a lot of this stuff. Also, it makes you wonder if Darth Vader can do that, if he's that powerful, Like, why didn't he do that kind of stuff before? Like when Luke takes out the Death Star in episode 4, like, don't you think Darth Vader could have done something like that? Just made Luke's X-Wing crash or something? Because if you can make a whole space cruiser just freeze in outer space, like, man, seems like he could have applied that elsewhere, right? But
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, logic goes out the window with a lot of stuff, I think.
I guess it brings up a larger problem, I guess, with Star Wars in general. I guess just or Force in Star Wars in general, because the prequels are kind of guilty of this too, where the original trilogy, it's very much about the sword fight, and like Force powers are very limited, because back in it was made in the 70s and 80s, and of course
hmm
the first Star Wars had a much lower budget,
Yeah.
and you have two old men just in A New Hope, just swinging a couple swords very slowly at each other with very minimal like fight choreography.
Yeah.
And then you go to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they're just throwing mountains at each other with
Right.
the Force, you know
Yep.
whereas so I guess that's a problem with Star Wars in general, but I feel like it seems the most noticeable in Obi-Wan,
Yeah.
with how
Yeah.
over the top some of the Force powers are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, especially like I think it was in the OG series, Yoda was like there I think it was Yoda. There was a discussion like what's the Force? And then oh no, it was in the new movies, I think, when Rey, she's like, isn't the Force like just picking up like rocks and stuff? And then Luke's like, that could be no, like that's so wrong in every way. And here we are seeing Obi-Wan like doing like Scarlet Witch moves and just like picking up like rocks with the Force, and it's just like throwing them in anger and stuff like
Yeah. Last little bit on Obi-Wan. I really agree with a lot what you mentioned, Christian, about how there are awesome moments in the show, but then there's a lot of like not so awesome stuff too. Yeah, I thought the show started off really strong, because it essentially poses the question, like, what did Obi-Wan Kenobi do between episodes 3 and 4, right? And it's a pretty compelling question, because he wasn't just camped out on Tatooine looking over Luke Skywalker. It presents this whole adventure he went on, right? And I was curious. I'm like, oh wow, what did Obi-Wan do? And it was compelling storytelling, I think. But then I thought the show fell back on like a lot of old stuff that has been popular in the past, going back to the well, Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader. And like you're saying, Porfirio, like, fun action scenes. But, at the end of the day, I kind of felt like what was the point of all that? We got to see Obi-Wan fight Darth Vader before multiple times, the two of them going at it, when they're older and when they were quite young. So here they go again. And the whole thing really felt, I don't know, kind of unnecessary. The whole show kind of felt unnecessary to me. So on one hand, yes, fun and kind of exciting at times, but yeah, it just kind of got me feeling kind of empty at the end. Like I was like, well, I guess it was fun, but sort of pointless, why did I watch that? So yeah, kind of a somewhat mediocre feeling at the end, I guess.
hmm
All right, let's move on. What other shows were notable to you? Any other favorites we want to call out here?
Peacemaker.
Yeah.
There we go. Great show.
I was about to call that one out.
Great show.
You want to start off, Christian? and then yeah.
Yeah. So Peacemaker, it's continuing off the Suicide Squad from 2021. James Gunn helming the project and stars John Cena's character of Peacemaker. And and I think the show was so much fun. Probably my favorite like superhero show from this year. And I thought it was like it kind of continues that same humor from the Suicide Squad. Of course, with a lot of gore, as he's trying to stop this alien invasion from happening. Kind of like a bit of like a body snatchers type scenario. And I think he teams up with his crew of like kind of no names and like leftovers from the Suicide Squad. And I thought like it kind of hit a lot of different notes where you have like these really wickedly dark, funny moments. You have some very heartfelt moments where you see John Cena show a lot of range, especially the scenes that involve like the way with him and his dad, where his dad also kind of plays this like evil Nazi villain, or no, Klansman villain. And as well as some good action with plenty of gore.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. FYI, we did do a full Peacemaker recap episode earlier this year. Recommend y'all check it out. But if I'm not mistaken, you weren't on that particular episode, right, Porfirio?
Yeah.
Maybe you can give us your thoughts here.
Yeah, I think Peacemaker was a film that I think I was just not expecting to be like, yeah, one of my favorites of the year. It was a total like where did this come from? Because I just remember like I think it came out in January. I was like, okay, like nothing ever comes out in January. So I was and yeah, I was like, okay, I'll just watch this just for fuck's sake. And then just the the opening credits alone with that whole dance sequence thing, like right at the bat caught my attention, and I was interested. I was like, okay, if this is the type of vibe this show gives off, I think I'm gonna enjoy this. And it was just fucking hilarious. The show was just really great. And I had a lot of fun watching it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Peacemaker in the movie, but in the TV show, it was just really, really fun.
Right on. Yeah, I agree. This show is hilarious. It is so funny. And I think it should be stated that this show, like, how it came to be is very interesting, right? Because James Gunn doing the Suicide Squad should not have happened, right? Because that really came as a result of him getting fired from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So somehow he gets to do the Suicide Squad. And then it was only as a result of that he ended up doing Peacemaker. Interestingly, he still got to do Guardians 3. But I'm telling you, this show, it really should not have happened, and what a gift to us all that it did happen, right? So wildly entertaining, hilarious, and yeah, just like a must see. Definitely on my list for one of the best shows of the year. So I don't think we can go into so much depth on everything. So maybe we'll kind of pick up the pace a bit. Let's see. Yeah, we can continue with some of our picks, our favorites in terms of shows. Any other favorites we want to call out?
Yeah, I guess I got another one.
Go ahead.
Let's see. I guess it's not comic book related, but it's still fandom related. So I think this is my, I think, total favorite show of the year. Um, and it's kind of, it is looking back to what we loved last year. It's kind of similar to that. Um, okay, so the show is called Cyberpunk Edge Runners. It's
Mm.
an anime miniseries done by Studio Trigger. Studio Trigger, you probably know them, Henry, from Star Wars Visions. That's what they
Yes.
did last year on Disney Plus, and this is their big project for 2022. Um, Also a Western sci-fi property. Um, for Cyberpunk, based on the Cyberpunk 2077 video game, which is a kind of a continuation from the tabletop Cyberpunk RPG. And Cyberpunk in general is like really my big jam. So this kind of ticked a lot of big boxes for me. Going back to, I guess I'll have a little bit of a story. Going back to 2020, one of the big hot new releases that I was highly anticipating was Cyberpunk 2077. It looked really, really cool. It was like this big open world cyberpunk city, but the game on launch was a complete disaster. It ran so poorly on just
Yeah.
about any machine that people like were demanding refunds en masse for this game. It was like this big, big disaster at the end of 2020 because it came out, was supposed to be a big thing for the holidays, and like there were all these apologies issued from CD Projekt Red, the company, and they like it pretty much killed all enthusiasm for the game, and people were saying it was like one of the worst games of the year. Um, and you know, but they announced this anime, and I was like kind of around the same time they were doing the game to like kind of help promote it later down the line. And because of that, I paid zero attention to it until it came out and it was recommended to me. It said, "Oh, you really do got to check this out. It's actually really good," by a friend. And I ended up, yeah, I ended up really loving this show. Um, and I will also say, adding on to that story, the show was so good and ended up being so beloved that it actually saved the game. People at like once the show hit, a lot of people ended up rebuying Cyberpunk, and it ended up
Wow.
being for a while Steam's highest played single player game. It, um, and like that is kind of, I guess, the power of the show, and now like people I think of Cyberpunk much more fondly now because of this. And it's the show itself is a very like it moves at an extremely like quick pace. It's 10 episodes. You kind of live in the world of Night City where this takes place, and it's a very hard R animated show. It actually reminded me, there are definitely some parts that felt a bit like Akira in a way. Whether it's as good as
Mm.
Akira, time will tell. Akira is an all-time classic. But I will say this was, I think, for me, the big standout show of the year, and especially like the biggest surprise of the year.
Right on. Good call out. And that is available on Netflix, correct?
Yes, it's actually like one of those Netflix exclusives.
Right on.
Okay.
Okay, I'll throw out some picks and then get to my show of the year. Yeah, we talked a little bit about like fandom, not fandom. Here's a couple shows that are definitely not fandom shows, but I definitely wanted to call it out. So there's a show called Severance that came out this year. Season 1
Mm.
Severance, phenomenal. And it's almost like one of those shows that defies any kind of description. It's just one of those, you just got to see it and find out. Yeah, that's all I'll say about Severance. Highly recommend that. I also highly recommend Euphoria season 2. This is
Mm.
kind of a forgotten show, but yes, a 2022 release, came out early in the year, and I was completely blown away. yeah, season 1 was great. Season 2 maybe even better. And for those who only know Zendaya from the MCU or maybe as like a Disney kid, she is amazing in this show. There's one episode in particular in season 2 that she is just jaw-droppingly awesome. So Euphoria season 2 was like, I definitely want to call that out because that was an early in the year release, and like I said, it's not fandom related, but man, I think that was the show where I just could not stop watching it more than any other show this year. Just a few quick shots. Peacemaker we talked about. The Boys season 3 came out this year. We had an episode on The Boys. That was a big highlight. Paper Girls season 1 came out this year. Excellent show. We talked about Andor. That was among the best. Okay, let's get to Marvel a bit. She-Hulk season 1 was on my list of best shows of the year. And bit of a plot twist here, but Werewolf by Night. This is technically a TV special, a one-off TV special. So we'll include it here as a television show. And I'm making a bold statement, and I'm calling it my show of the year. Number 1, I thought it was great. But number 2, I'm making a statement that there's just too much content on TV now. So I want to see less. I want to see less episodes. And I like the fact that this is a one-off. I'd love to see more one-offs like this in the future. It's a great homage to classic horror. It's the MCU as we've never seen it. And it's a whole lot of fun. We get to see Werewolf by Night. We get to see Man-Thing. Some characters we've never seen in a live action format before. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of excellent TV. But yeah, making the bold statement saying Werewolf by Night was my favorite.
Yeah, definitely going off what you said, Henry. Like, I love Werewolf by Night. I thought it was just a really like fun Halloween segment that was just like, yeah, played an homage to, the Universal Monsters era, the black and
Yeah.
white cinematography, the kind of like goofy, cheesy costumes that just works, and the music, and yeah, it was great to see, yeah, like Gael Garcia's performance in that show.
Yep.
Alyssa Bloodstone, her character come to life, Man-Thing, and it was just a lot of great fun. I think it was one of the few Disney Plus stuff that I like waited till midnight for when it came out so I could
Nice.
watch.
Right on.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Christian.
I also just wanted to, I guess, quickly say my thing about Werewolf by Night, and that I also really loved it, and that I thought like it was like it was a really cool like homage to like the old films, like the old Universal horror films. It did really feel really fresh for the MCU, you know. I think like kind of I think within the runtime, what it was doing, and like the characters that it brought felt like very disconnected, but still had a bit of that good MCU charm with characters like Elsa Bloodstone. I think I could I do want to see her come back, you know.
Yeah. Same.
As
Yeah.
well as Man-Thing.
Sure.
Some shows I want to call out, I think that all have like major fandoms are Stranger Things season 4, I think it was. That came back in 2 parts on Netflix. That was really, really fun and awesome. I think because it's been like a few years since the previous season was out. So I definitely recommend that one. And then two medieval fantasy shows that I really enjoyed were Rings of Power, a Lord of the Rings fandom show on Amazon Prime, and House of Dragons, Game of Thrones franchise show on HBO Max. And yeah, like Lord Rings of Power, I know wasn't that beloved within with for a lot of folks, but I do recommend it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It talks about like it gives some nods to like the Lord of the Rings movies while maintaining its own storyline within Middle Earth. The effects are amazing. The storyline is great. The action scenes are great. So I do recommend that one. And House of Dragon. Like, I know we all had our reservations about Game of Thrones, the final season. I know I definitely did. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna watch House of Dragon just because there's nothing else to watch. And thank God I did, because that show made me remember why I love the Game of Thrones franchise. Like, great action scenes. The music is phenomenal, like always. The storyline is just pure drama. You just like it gets you into that mood of like, who's gonna die? Who's gonna kill who? Who's gonna betray who? And I do, yeah, that's another show I do recommend.
Isn't it crazy? A year later, how our perspectives have changed, right? Because I remember before these shows dropped, it was your anticipation was like the reverse, right? Referio, you were completely
Mhm.
uninterested in House of the Dragon.
I
Meanwhile,
really, really,
Rings of Power was like maybe your most anticipated show of the year. Yeah.
yeah. Mhm,
Wild.
mhm.
Okay, so it sounds like Christian show of the year is Cyberpunk Edge Runners. My show of the year is Werewolf by Night. Do you have a show of the year, Porfirio?
Oof. Probably my show of the year would have to be. Oh, I'm having like a tough time between my first two picks of either Peacemaker or Andor, but I probably would give it to Andor. Um, just because I think like just on like a rewatchable level and recommendation level, I think I would enjoy Andor more. Um, but just a quick few more call outs.
Go ahead.
Two Marvel shows that I kind of did not have any expectation for, but just I really loved, and we did podcasts on them. Is Miss Marvel and She Hulk. Like those are just shows that I was just like based off the trailers I was watching. I was like, I didn't really care for them, but as watching the shows, I really fell in love with both of the structure of both of those shows and just the refreshness of telling these like MCU Disney Plus shows, like I think one thing that I enjoyed about like, like Loki and WandaVision was like it didn't fit that like MCU storyline of like action, action, action. This was more like let there be room for these storylines to breathe and then throw in some action. Um, like yeah, we talked more about these in podcasts for both episodes for both TV shows, but those were yeah two other of my favorites this year.
Excellent. Excellent. Good call outs. Um, yeah, you know what just crossed my mind? We talked about how slow is not necessarily bad. Short is not necessarily bad either. My last little nugget on Werewolf by Night, that is a one-off 1 hour TV special, right? And I thought it was great, and for something to be great, it doesn't have to be a 3-hour movie. It doesn't have to be a 10 episode season, right? It can be a 1 hour special. It's okay. Short can be awesome. So again, just echoing my sentiment that there's a lot of content out there. There doesn't have to be so much quality. Let's have some quality over quantity. Why not? So we talked about the best. Let's get into the worst. We talked a little bit about some of the worst, but let's go a little deeper. Yeah. What were the worst shows of the year? I already mentioned Book of Boba Fett. We all kind of chimed in on that. That is my worst show of the year. I want to add too that I was highly disappointed in the Moon Knight show. We did an episode on Moon Knight, and we talked about this quite a bit, but definitely not my worst of the year, but one of the biggest disappointments for me, Moon Knight season 1. I definitely want to continue to see the further adventures of Moon Knight in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I have to be honest in that I thought season 1 was pretty lackluster. Yeah. So that's on my list as well. How about you guys? What are some of your guys' picks for worst TV of the year?
Well, I guess we were talking about this a little bit before. I guess so I guess the disclaimer is that I've only really seen the first episode of this. And then I kind of like kind of kept up with it and saw like clips, bits. But I think like the show ended up being super hated, so I think it's okay if I say this. The show is Halo, another video game show. Show based on a video game that I had a great experience with, which is Halo, a video game series that I've adored and loved. Which is a weird flip side from Cyberpunk, which was on release was pretty hated. And going into that, I think there was a lot. I think this is a show that we had a lot of hype for going back to our upcoming episode at the beginning of the year. And I think it's just like it felt like a bit too much of a departure from Halo. I think it focused a lot too much. It felt like it went too much into its own direction. And I think the great story of Halo was just like you kind of wonder why I couldn't tell the story from the games, or at least like the books, you know, and how it's like Master Chief stranded on Halo with Cortana, that he can kind of go back and forth as they try to solve the mission. You have some other Marines in there for him to bounce off of. You like Mandalorian kind of showed that you didn't need to have the main character take his helmet off in order for him to be compelling. And Mando and Grogu even kind of fits in a similar way to Chief and Cortana, although Cortana is, speaks and has a much different personality than Grogu. But, you kind of, I feel like it's there, but it seemed like they kind of went into a bit too much of its own direction with a love interest character that it focused on, who was the head of the Covenant. There was one scene I talked about that just weirded me the fuck out, that I was like, what the fuck? Fuck this show. Was the one Master Chief or his love interest is caught in prison. Master Chief, meets with her, and they totally start having sex, and you see Master Chief's ass. A character of the games, you didn't even see his face. And this one, they show both cheeks, and Cortana like watches, and I'm watching this just scene play out because it was such a memed scene on the internet, and it was like something that like as I was like trying to keep up with the show, people were just talking about how much they hate it. And it's like, what is this? What are you doing? Oh my god. my beloved game franchise. What they think this is a good idea? Why is this is in Halo?
Yeah, that sounds like it goes right along with what we were talking about earlier. Things that you really didn't have to see, right? You didn't have to see these things from your beloved characters.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like seeing Boba Fett in his underwear. Like,
Yeah.
the
No
fact
one
that
asked for it. We don't need
exactly
this.
another character whose face you didn't see. It's kind of like Mando set the kind of showed what to do with these
Yeah.
kinds of characters. And Book of Boba Fett and Halo, two characters very similar that just kind of went way too off the rails into weird directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, Christian, I'm not gonna, because yeah, I finished the show. I'm not gonna like defend it or anything, but I will say like there are some parts to the show that was pretty cool. Like there is like some cool scenes where you see like stuff from Master Chief's point of view, and it gives you that video game feel, where he's just like shooting, and like low armor shield, and then like going to find new gun and like meleeing elites and grunts. But is it the TV show you want? No, it's not. But there are some cool uh homages to the video game franchise, I will say.
That is fair. I did see some action I thought was really, really cool.
I don't know if that's going to convince you enough to finish it,
No,
but
I'm never gonna finish it. But I will say I have seen some of the action as well as the very first scene is like the Covenant
uh,
like coming onto a planet and killing all these people. And I was like, whoa, holy crap! That's that's the part that kind of hooked me.
yeah.
All right. So then, Christian, are you saying Halo is your pick for worst of the year?
Probably, yeah. I completely dropped it, so I guess take that with a grain of salt. Um, but yeah, I'll go with Halo.
Got it. How about you, Porfirio? Do you have a pick for worst show of the year?
I mean, right now, at the top of my head, it's definitely Boba Fett, but yeah, I just can't think of any other show that comes to mind where it's like, oh God, this was bad, and I still kept watching. I don't know, Henry. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I listed Book of Boba Fett as my definitive worst. Worst. Moon Knight was definitely a disappointment. Um, I hadn't mentioned this before, but Miss Marvel, I wasn't too hot on. I think that was on my list of worst of the year also. Um, but certainly had. I mean, I definitely don't hate that show. I think there's a lot of positives from it. And like Moon Knight, I do look forward to seeing more of Kamala Khan in the MCU. Okay. Any other comments on TV in 2022?
Like I don't want to. I don't want to, because this show I didn't finish it, so I won't say it's good or bad, but I just want to say really fast and give like homage that this year was the final season of Walking Dead,
Mm,
and that's like a franchise like me and Henry we both love, but we fell off a long time
yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
and I just want to give a quick shout out to that franchise and what it meant to us like in its early seasons, and now to finally like end. I don't know how many seasons it ended with, but it was definitely a show that I just feel like needs to be like we need to just say like a quick homage to, since it ended this year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great call out. The Walking Dead was my favorite show for quite some time. And it had a big impact on me. And yeah, like it's kind of sad that it has ended now. But you know, the whole thing makes me think of how maybe shows can go on for too long. I definitely feel this way with The Walking Dead, where it just was on for too long. And that we aren't alone, Porfirio. A lot of other Walking Dead fans dropped off quite some time ago, and that can happen. You know, that can happen. Things can linger on too long. So yeah, you know, a lot of times when shows end or certain people quit their shows, you wonder like, what are you doing? But you know, a lot of times it makes sense because you don't want to wear out your welcome, right? So I think that might be a good way to categorize that particular show. Okay, I think we can move on to movies now. Yeah, let's do it. 2022, a lot of movies came out, and we certainly saw a lot of them. Do we have some picks for favorite movies of the year?
Yeah, I'll start. And I'll just keep it going with this DC hype train. The Batman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, with Pattinson. I think like also like DC has messed up a lot of their movies, a lot of their franchises, but hey, they always come through with a good Batman movie. And I wasn't I think with we talked about this quite a lot in our Batman episode uh when the movie dropped, but I just want to like I guess emphasize I think how much I think this has become one of my like top personal favorite like comic book movies. I think it really is a Batman for the 2020s. And I think the way it uses mood, the way it uses the lighting, it makes Gotham feel so lived in and rich, and how it really captures the essence of Batman in its own way. And it's something that I'm really like excited to see what's next for it. Where do they go from here?
hmm
Yeah, good point. Good point. I highly enjoyed this movie as well. Any thoughts, Porfirio, on the Batman?
Yeah, like we shared our thoughts on the podcast, so I just want to say like really fast, yeah, like it was definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. Was it the only DC film that came out this year?
Oh,
There was one more. I guess we could talk about it in a bit. Or actually a couple more, but this is like the big one.
yeah.
Okay. But yeah, like was it wasn't so much like superhero-y and cliche, I guess, or campy. That's the word I'm looking for, like the Marvel films, but it wasn't like too realistic. Like I guess like the Nolan films, it felt like the right balance between the two. And because you get the whole detective side of Bruce Wayne, and Robert Patterson, yeah, just killed it as Bruce Wayne and Batman. Like, and the Riddler villain was just also great. So definitely one of my favorites also of the year.
I like that point you alluded to, Porfirio. This is not a Marvel movie, and it doesn't try to be a Marvel movie. This is a Batman movie. This is, you know, pun intended, the Batman movie, right? Um, yeah, you know, like the whole debacle that happened with the Justice League movie, um, it just stank of DC trying to be Marvel, right? They were trying to do the team up, and they got Joss Whedon who did the Avengers, and like the whole thing stank of like, oh, let's just do what Marvel's doing, and it just turned into this crazy like Frankenstein's monster of a movie. um but you know, with this movie you can see what can happen when you're not trying to copy someone else, when you're not trying to be Marvel, right? You're just doing your thing. And it was very refreshing. This is, I remember watching this movie with you guys, and we had just seen Spider-Man No Way Home, like not long before, right? Just like a couple months before. And I was just feeling so good, because we had just seen an amazing Spider-Man movie, and here we were watching an amazing Batman movie, and I'm like, this is the world I want to live in. A world where we get completely awesome Spider-Man and Batman movies. This is heaven, right? And you can't think of two more different movies, right? How cool is that? Very cool.
Mhm.
Okay. What else? I think there were a lot of other good movies that came out this year.
You-
Any picks for us, Porfirio?
Yeah, two movies I want to call out where I was totally rooting for the quote unquote villain was Doctor Strange 2 and Black Panther 2. We had podcasts on both of those, and on both of those podcasts, I said I was rooting for the villain, Scarlet Witch and Namor. Like, I was totally like, I see where they're coming from, so I definitely root for them, and those are definitely two of my favorite MCU films of the year.
Right on. Yeah. I definitely had some issues with both movies, but ultimately I did enjoy both. I think with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in particular, I had a really good time at the movie theater with you all. Yeah, that's a fun movie. It's really bonkers, and it's a visual delight. A lot of fun, and it kept the Marvel multiverse train going. Yeah. So the Marvel multiverse had a lot of momentum from last year, with Spider-Man in particular. But yeah, that whole multiverse train kept going. Interestingly, though, one could argue that Doctor Strange was not the best multiverse movie to come out this year. There's a little movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is inexplicably also a multiverse movie in a very different way. But this is something else, man. I saw this a few months ago, and I was pretty blown away. It's hard to describe this movie. It's kind of a kung fu sci-fi family drama all at once. But I know you had some pretty strong thoughts on this one. Yeah, Porfirio, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I saw this movie when it first came out because I just heard like a bunch of um, being told like this movie's so awesome, and I watched that movie like completely blind. All I heard was just like, I need to watch it. I didn't know what the movie was about. I didn't watch a trailer. I went in it completely blind and I fucking loved it. I didn't know that there was, yeah, like a multiverse storyline or I didn't even know who was in it, to be honest.
Mm.
And like, it was just fucking awesome. That right there is my movie of the year. Like, I enjoyed it a lot, and it got nominated for best comedy of the year next year for the Golden Globes, and I think it absolutely deserves it.
Right
Yeah,
on.
like definitely agree. Like I feel like this might be, I don't know, it's hard to say. I feel like Batman might be the movie of the year for me. It's probably the one I'm going to rewatch the most, but Everything Everywhere All at Once is probably like the best movie I've seen this year. I think I feel like it really does take that multiverse concept to like to its full potential, and the movie really lives up to the name Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like I
Mhm,
found the movie to be, it's almost like I found it to be like a little overwhelming at times
mhm.
with everything I was seeing. And I remember feeling so exhausted by the end of the movie because it was everything everywhere all at once. And it just takes you on such a journey, like
Yeah.
a multiversal journey. Even though if you think about like a lot of times the location, it really just stays in one building. It just stays in that like IRS building for the entire movie,
Right. That's
while
right.
also going into so many different universes and how they'll say like she'll there's a part where the main character Michelle Yeoh's character says mixes up ratatouille with a raccoon, and then you see that that's actually its own universe, and it really shows like the
Yeah,
idea of what like infinite possibilities could be. It's like one of the most original movies I feel like I've seen in a while.
for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, like I just love. I think like the whole like discussion around like I use this term a lot. I don't know if you guys have ever used it. Intergenerational trauma, you know,
Mm,
about like
Mm.
that like pressure of like coming from like an immigrant household, and just that pressure of like living up to be the perfect child for a parent, like obviously we're told from like a young age like parents want what's the best from us, the best for us. But then that's like, I don't know, as you grow up, I feel like that's a lot to live up to, and this film like discusses that pressure and that stress really well, that I don't know, I just loved it so much, and I, yeah, cried watching it. It was really beautiful and entertaining in the best possible ways.
right on. Yes, agreed. Great, great movie. All right. So we got some top picks. The Batman, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And my pick for movie of the year, it is the Predator sequel, Prey. This came out this year as well. And man, we were talking about original concepts and kind of refreshing takes on things. I mean, I can't think of a more original concept. I mean, this is a Predator sequel, but it's a Predator movie like we have never seen before. Um, yeah, it's like, I mean, it's so refreshing. It has like an all Native American cast. The lead, Amber Midthunder, who plays Naru, is phenomenal in this movie. And like, yeah, it works on so many levels because we've talking about some shows and movies are fandom and some art. This is a fandom movie. This is it is in uh the series of Predator movies. So it is part of Predator fandom, but man, it doesn't feel like it. It's kind of like we've been talking about with Andor, how Andor is a Star Wars show, but it kind of doesn't feel like a Star Wars show. And the whole time we're just wrapped up in it and we're just loving it. And yeah, really cool. Um, Again, it's hard to describe. It's one of those movies you got to go see. Um, and yeah, it kind of plays upon um, just what Native Americans have gone through in this country, but at the same time delivering like a wildly entertaining action adventure movie with some pretty awesome Predator action. Like, yes, it's very different from other Predator movies, but um, if you're a fan of Predator movies, you're still gonna get what you want. You get some awesome Predator action in it, so works
Mhm.
on so many levels. You guys have any thoughts on Prey?
Yeah, I also really, really liked Prey. It's definitely
Oh,
one of my
wow,
favorites of the
Krisha,
year.
I'm
Hmm?
low-key surprised you watched it.
Yeah, Like I usually don't do horror, but I've always liked Predator, like Predator and
Okay.
Alien movies. And this
Mhm.
definitely is the best Predator sequel. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I think it does a really great job of harkening back to the feel of the original Predator. And like I think the downscaling the technology, the way it goes back to the like focuses on like a Native American tribe and like the 1700s, like makes everything like it ups the tension because you in the first movie Predator, you see how they have such a hard time taking out the Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers, like big like guys with like really big muscles and lots of guns, and how the Predator like just pretty much eats through all of that. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is like the only man surviving, and he has to use his wits and like tactics in the jungle in order to defeat the Predator. And I feel like this really harkens back to that in the American West with where they don't have any guns, or like the guns that there's like some trappers that show up that do have guns, but they don't really know how to use them. And how our main character is, yeah, like she's this girl who's like very inexperienced, and we see that in the beginning of the movie, and how she has a lot of problems hunting a lion and can't do it, but she's very clever, and she knows how to make she has this really cool like axe on a rope that she throws, and
Mhm.
you kind of see her kind of build up those skills over the course of the movie to defeat the Predator. And so like I thought it like kind of captured that really well.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the film was really cool for, yeah, having like an all indigenous cast, and the action scenes were just really great. Um, Henry, you talk about this quality over quantity, and like it is kind of a slow movie, but it just has like a lot of room to like breathe and create great like character and story development that just like pays off to like good action scenes towards the end. And even, yeah, just the landscape shots were phenomenal. So yeah, good pick.
Right on. Okay. So we talked about the best. How about the worst? Were there bad movies that came out this year? Any picks for worst?
Okay. Hmm. Well, all right. I feel like in the superhero world there definitely is a definitive worst of the year. And that's Morbius, the big meme of the year,
Hmm.
the one that made $1 more billion. The big meme, the pretty much like the movie that was so bad it became a meme. And yeah, I guess like I think I pretty much gave it a very hard one in our review of it. It's kind of pretty much the worst of the Sony movies that have come out. The Sony Spider-Man movies without Spider-Man. It does everything. It feels like the dollar store
Yep.
MCU at home in order to capture another meme. Um, and I will say though, I do find the memes pretty funny. I did have a very good chuckle at a lot of them, if that makes it better. Like what surrounds the movie is a lot better than what's in the movie.
Hey, I didn't really participate in the Morbius recap episode because I hadn't seen it at the time, but I have since, so maybe I'll throw in my 2 cents now. Um, Not gonna say that Morbius is a good movie by any means. But I had the luxury of watching it at home on Netflix for free. So maybe that took the sting out of it a little bit because I thought there were some worthwhile qualities. I kind of dug the smoke trail effects in it, um yeah, overall the action wasn't great, but I thought some of the effects were kind of cool. I had such low expectations for this one that I wasn't expecting anything. So, um, I mildly enjoyed parts of it. Yeah. That said, not a great flick. Definitely on my list for among the worst. I don't think it was the worst, but among the worst. I'll say that.
Yeah, for me, none of these movies I'm gonna say are the worst, but some, I guess, like disappointments for me were like
Mhm.
um the revival of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new Hellraiser film on Hulu, Halloween Ends,
Mm.
but like yeah, some other major disappointing films that are franchise films were like Avatar 2, Jurassic World 3, Fantastic Beasts 3. Um, yeah, I was pretty let down by those ones. Yeah,
Okay. Well, do you have a definitive worst of the year?
yeah, Thor 4.
Oh, Thor
Yeah.
Love and Thunder.
I was okay, like yeah, I think yeah, we did a whole podcast on that, and I forget that we did a podcast on it. But going into it, I didn't care for it. Um, there were just so many things wrong with it, and yeah, I just did not enjoy it, and it was very disappointment because Taiki Watiki, he did phenomenal in Thor 3, and this was just a huge letdown. I know you guys don't like Thor 2, but I would watch Thor 2 again any day of the week over Thor 4.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, Thor 4 was just horrible for me. Like those fucking screaming goats and the
Yeah.
every kid getting like Thor's hammer, and oh my gosh, there were just so many bad things with that movie.
Yeah, I think I really want to echo that for Furio. I think you're really right. This probably is like I think the biggest disappointment of the year because I loved Thor Ragnarok so much, and it's like, oh man, it's we're gonna get more Ragnarok, but it's like I think a little too much. It kind of goes way too far into that. And I think I was a little more positive on our in our episode. I haven't really gone back and listened to it, but I think my I think I gave it a 2 out of 5. But the movie's gotten a lot worse over time. The longer it's sat with me, so I think now it's like I want to erase that and give it a 1 because just like the jokes kind of get they get lamer as long as you sit with it. Um, like there's a video that came out where like um it was like they were doing it for Vanity Fair. It was like Taika Waititi, I think Tessa Thompson might have also made an appearance in it. That they kind of like they're talking about a scene and they kind of just like make like a few backhand comments on like the visual effects of it and how it's like that looks pretty unfinished and it's like a completed scene. And then there was kind of like a leaked memo that came out that like they were like way overworking their visual effects staff on
Mm.
the on it's just a lot of Marvel movies, just it was kind of more in general, but I think like the kind of that and like it kind of leaves like a bit more of a bad taste in your mouth with this movie in particular. It just didn't
Hmm.
really seem like the heart was really there the same way that it was in Thor Ragnarok. So yeah, that was also on my worst of the year list.
All right. Yeah. Furthering on that, Thor Love and Thunder was on my worst of the year list also. In fact, like Porfirio, this is my worst movie of the year. Um, yeah, it cannot be overstated that this movie was a huge disappointment. I remember when we reviewed it right after we saw it, um, the sentiment really was, how could this movie miss? You know, it's got Taika Waititi at the helm again, pretty much the same cast as Thor Ragnarok. How can this go wrong? And it really went wrong in so many ways. Um, but over anything was the fact that it just wasn't funny. It was not funny. I barely laughed at this movie, and I couldn't believe it because Thor Ragnarok is hilarious. And again, I'm just kind of rehashing what we talked about in that episode, but I want to add this too. So on top of all of that, like it's just crazy that the same people who made Thor Ragnarok made this piece of shit. But I want to add too that Taika Waititi has done a lot of awesome shit in his career, not just Thor Ragnarok. I mean, we're talking Hunt for the Wilder People and Jojo Rabbit, great movies. Our Flag Means Death and What We Do in the Shadows. Like, this guy has a great track record, and like I have a lot of trust in his brand of humor, you know, and his ability to tell great stories. But it was just all lacking here. Like, I don't know what happened. So yeah. Shockingly bad, really. Yeah, just a big disappointment for sure.
Henry,
Yeah.
let me ask you really fast. Let me ask you, which one was more disappointing, this one or Eternals?
Okay. Oh, that's a great question because you know, I have a lot of hatred for the Eternals movie.
Exactly, yeah.
But your specific question, what is more disappointing? I think I'd have to say Thor: Love and Thunder because of everything I just mentioned. I was expecting a really good movie. With Eternals, I was kind of like, I didn't really know what to expect. It was really bad, but I didn't have big expectations. So specific to your question, I would have to say Thor is the more disappointing of the two, if you can believe that. Okay. So in wrapping up here, let's just talk about 2022 overall. Any general thoughts? Personally, I think there was a lot of quantity over quality this year with shows and movies. There was a lot of stuff, and yes, some of it was pretty good. A lot of it wasn't though. So yeah, I think quality was a bit lacking for a lot of this year. Any general thoughts on the year that was from you guys?
Yeah.
I think for
Oh,
go
for it,
ahead,
Porphyria.
Christian.
No, go for it, Porphyria.
Okay, I think for me, I enjoyed a lot of TV stuff more than the movies. Um, yeah, like, for the movies, it was just like a lot of like, disappointing stuff, like very recently, like, yeah, like Avatar 2. But for TV shows, I just felt like there's some pretty good content out there. Um, and yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Is like this year, it was, I think, like Henry, you said this before, nothing that stood out strongly in terms of both TV shows and movies, but it was I felt more, I have a more lukewarm uh response slash feeling to like the TV shows as opposed to the movies this year.
Got it.
Yeah. So I think my thoughts. So I guess I'll keep it very like comic book media based. So
Mhm.
I guess like quantity over quality is definitely how I described like Marvel this year specifically. Um, it felt like there was always something in the MCU happening at any point in time. And I think like it's definitely when I was like, I feel like Thor Love and Thunder specifically is like part of when I think like that fatigue hit, you know, because it was, I'd always felt like we were there. There were lots of like Disney Plus stuff always kind of going in, as well as like, we had our three movies on top of that. And like I think when like the stuff kind of like there was a lot of stuff I was a little more meh on. I think that we had talked about, and I think when I look back at like a lot of what I've said over the years or about things like Moon Knight, like I think I liked it, a little bit more, but it's still like it was all right. Wasn't as big. I wasn't I as big as on She-Hulk as you guys were, and but I think that it felt like it was like too much, and I think even Marvel, Kevin Feige, somewhere I feel like I've read this on the internet that Phase 5 they do want to strip back the quantity and focus a little more on quality. But on the DC side, I feel like so far in this episode we've talked about like Peacemaker, the Batman being like some of the best comic book stuff we've seen this year. Yet DC was also a bit of a wildfire this year with everything that's been going on behind the scenes. Many of their projects just got delayed, so we didn't really get the
Yeah.
quantity from them because they either delayed it or outright cancel it. Like Batgirl, there was a big company shift with the big buyout with Discovery, and
Hmm.
it seems like they're just doing scorched earth on everything now.
Yeah.
I think I'm feeling a little bit more positive about it, but it felt like for a while I was like, God, what are they doing? Oh my God, this is a horrible. Like, you just kind of it felt like you were seeing all the mismanagement come to the forefront, even if it's like something you've already seen with DC for years. But I feel like it really exploded this year.
Yeah.
So while there was some great stuff, it was so wild. And so it's like I feel like I'm feeling a lot differently on these two than how I did at the beginning of the year. But I will say, like, I feel like I've said this last year, uh, and when I was talking a bit about this in when I was talking about Cyberpunk, is that anime and Shonen Jump is actually, I think, at some of its best this year. I think that this is like in terms of comic book media, this is really where it's at. I think there was a lot of really great stuff that came out this year, and we might go into this when we do a more the comic centric one because I picked up a bit of manga, but it's been going through a huge shift in the last year. Um, and there's been stuff that's been kind of reaching a much more worldwide stage. We saw it with Demon Slayer Mugen Train last year, and I think a lot of that's
Hmm.
continued with a lot of big box office success um,
Hmm.
for an anime that unseated or a manga that unseated One Piece as the top manga because Shonen Jump has viewers call it or write in what their favorites are and they rank them, which is a little different, which is very different from how Marvel and DC do it. The one I'm talking about is Jujutsu Kaisen, which released a big movie this year. That was a massive. That was maybe not a massive box office hit. It's pretty limited. Those are usually more limited release, but these releases are getting wider and they're bringing in a lot more of a general crowd. Another big one was that I really loved was the Dragon Ball Super superhero. Um, Odd name, but pretty solid movie as well. And there were a lot of great anime series this year. And I feel like I was saying like this is picked like it had the best year it's ever had in 2021 and it topped it in 2022. And I feel like it's really becoming Shonen Jump is kind of becoming this big worldwide tour de force. Whether or not it reached the same heights uh commercially here in the US as DC and Marvel. That's hard to say, especially on the movie front. But I feel like with the way I think I've decided I've been feeling about DC and Marvel this year, although DC, I think with James Gunn taking over, I'm a little more optimistic. But I feel like it's almost like this is where my attention is turning a bit more towards in the last year as like the big like comic book outlet, you know. But those are my thoughts. It's been probably a really strange year for comic book movies and comic books in general, and we'll probably get more into that in a later episode when we talk about the comics of this year.
Yeah, a lot of great call outs there, Christian. I do agree that with the MCU, it was kind of a microcosm of the whole year. There was a lot of quantity and a little lacking in quality. Yeah, I'll admit it, man. I am a Marvel super fan, and I will be the first to admit that this year was a disappointment for the MCU. You know, I think I was feeling it a little bit last year, a little bit of Marvel Studios bloat, but the year ended so strong, you know, like with the Hawkeye series and Spider-Man No Way Home. I was just feeling so good that I didn't really feel like the quantity was lacking, but I think it all kind of caught up this year where there was a lot of MCU content, and I was disappointed in quite a bit of it. Yeah. Um, you know, it's funny, looking back on my most anticipated stuff of this year. Um, I had listed Moon Knight as my most anticipated show. As I've stated, that was a big disappointment for me. And I had listed as my most anticipated movie Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And that didn't come out this year. It's been delayed. So there you have it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. A lot of Marvel disappointment on my end. We should talk about this a little bit more too. The DC universe shakeup. Yeah. So there was already a big shakeup with like Batgirl getting canceled and all the changes with the streaming services. But then more recently, there were some like real big goings ons, right? With all the stuff that James Gunn is doing. Interestingly, like you mentioned, Christian, it hasn't led to like disappointment, right? Because if anything, DC has kind of done the opposite. They've had the quality with less quantity, right? I mean, in a year where we got the Peacemaker series and the Batman movie, it's hard to be too disappointed in DC content. But I think there's a big question mark about what lies ahead, right? Yeah. You have any thoughts on this, Porfirio? The Henry Cavill walking away from the Superman role, James Gunn taking over. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, like that's just it's a big fucking mess, you know, what's going on at DC. Like, yeah, like you have like projects being canceled or being delayed. Like this year, I think, yeah, like Christian, you had alluded to it earlier that like both um Aquaman 2 and Flashpoint Paradox and obviously Shazam were supposed to come out this year, but they all got delayed. And with James Gunn taking over as head of DC Studios, um, you can see that he's just making like these like brand like changes with like the release content. Um, and a lot of it's like, yeah, like huge changes, like Henry Cavill like leaving as Superman, and Wonder Woman 3 being put on hold. And so it's kind of hard to see if these like changes are gonna pay off, later on. Like right now, we're just seeing like like I guess like being told like like being told as like as a kid like getting the candy taken away and being like no no no, but then let's see if like later on that's like good for us, like just realizing if all these changes are going to be beneficial and enjoyable in the long run. So James Gunn, we've seen his work in Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad, so and Peacemaker. So I think there's a lot of trust in his vision. Um, but that trust is like really hard to do at the moment. That's all I could say.
Yeah. I wonder too, like James Gunn is an amazing filmmaker. Um, but can you run a movie studio? It's seems to be a slightly different skill set. Yeah. It's like Kevin Feige has not directed a movie before, but he can run the hell out of that at Marvel Studios, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it remains to be seen how effective James Gunn is as a studio chief. We'll see. It's hard to deny his track record so far, so got to be optimistic, but certainly a lot of question marks. Any final thoughts on the DC universe, Christian?
Yeah. Well, I guess now might be, I guess, the time to, I guess, say what my thoughts are on Black Adam. Because I
Sure.
guess it wasn't really a movie that like I would put on my best or worst year of the year. Um, and I think it's kind of one of the last movies we'll see of this era of DC. And then I guess at this point, even though they're coming out, who knows if we're really going to see Flash and Aquaman? I think there's
Yeah.
probably no enthusiasm for those going forward. And I think there wasn't as much for Black Adam as well. Although I think there was a lot of big word of mouth. It was like one of the biggest um like Rotten Tomatoes disparities between what the critics thought and the fans thought. Where critics hated it, it was like 30% or whatever. And fans listed it as 90. And so it actually was like kind of carried by word of mouth. And when I watched it, I feel like it's a very like I feel like it's an okay movie. It has some parts that I really liked in the middle when I think they bring in the Justice Society, and there's a really good conflict they have with Black Adam, and how there's like you have this um, society of superhero team that kind of almost feels like a bit of a Team America World Police, where they're really just there because Amanda Waller, your U.S. government agent type, um, pretty much only sending them there to defend American interests because Black Adam is so strong, and uh, and they don't really know what to do with that power, so they want to control it and take him out. And whereas they kind of get there and they say, "Hey, we're superheroes. We're here to save you," and the people don't react well to that, and they think, "Well, where were you here when our city was being kind of ravaged by all these terrorists over the many years? Why are you just here now that we have a
Mhm.
savior?" And how there are two different ends of kind of of this plot. I think that's where the movie works the best, and the middle is where I really liked it. The beginning and the end, not so great. I think the ending just kind of devolves into a dumb CGI fight where they with a villain you really didn't see before that you don't care about at all. Um, there was some cheesy dialogue, of course, with The Rock always having to tell us that he wasn't a hero many times throughout the film. Uh, and the rest was very okay. So, I can't fully say that I recommend it, but it was whatever. I think if you've been invested in the DC and the universe at this point, probably worth it to check it out and see for yourself. Especially because um, I did enjoy that final end credit scene.
Hmm. And now that we know that Henry Cavill will no longer play Superman, how do we feel about his last appearance as Superman?
like it's so quick that but it gave me good, it gave me goosebumps, and it's like a lot of hype where it's like, yeah, he's back, even though he's kind of been done dirty in the role,
Mm-hmm.
uh, by Man of Steel and Justice League and BVS. I think I really liked him as Superman. I think Henry Cavill's a great actor, and he always puts a lot of passion into these kinds of roles. And so I think I've always wanted to see him really like shine as Superman, be the Superman we know as love. And so I think there was a lot of promise with that. So I was really excited when I saw it. But yeah, I think with them wiping the slate clean, maybe it's for the best.
Gotcha. Yeah, I kind of had a similar thought when I heard that Cavill is finally done with the role. That you know he's a good actor who could have been really good as Superman, but just never really got the chance to do it. Like he played Superman a lot, but a lot of it was pretty bad. I mean, looking back, maybe the best way to see him as Superman was in the Snyder cut of Justice League. Um, but even then, I don't know. Like, yeah, I just had this feeling that he never got the right project to really fly, literally fly as Superman. I don't know. What do you think, Porfirio? What are your thoughts on Henry Cavill and his exiting of the role?
I think I don't know. Like I just felt like he's been done dirty since like Man of Steel, to be honest. Like I feel like
Yeah,
Zack Snyder had like this perfect vision of what he wanted to do with the DC universe and what he wanted to do with Henry Cavill as Superman. And then Batman versus Superman was just like a shit show of like DC Studios and Snyder Cut like trying to like do what create like this like project of including like Wonder Woman and Batman and Doomsday. It was just a lot going on that
yeah,
there wasn't that much emphasis on Henry's Superman. And then Justice League, that's when it just really started going downhill because Henry left the DC Studios projects, but the Snyder Cut later on we found out like that Snyder, had this vision for him, and because we see that in the post-credit scene, and I think that was really awesome what was planned. So I just feel like I think yeah, like Christian said, like it's better probably for him to be cut right now than being like thrown in like this like mess that DC Universe is in, you know, and try to see where he fits in this new um quote unquote like restart of the DC franchise. Cause yeah, but I just feel like he was just never given the proper chance to be the Superman that I think Snyder had envisioned.
yeah. That seems to be a pretty popular sentiment that he just never it never really came to fruition. So yeah, yeah. There's certainly a feeling of disappointment, I suppose.
Hmm.
So the future is wide open for the DC universe. Should be pretty exciting to see what happens. I'm certainly curious. So we'll see. And speaking of looking ahead, we will, as we always do, a look ahead to 2023. We'll talk about our most anticipated shows and movies of the year. Yeah, that's always fun to kind of compare, especially this year, man. Like what we were anticipating for 2022, it all turned out a lot different than we thought. Yeah. Like some of the stuff we talked about today, man, like we were talking about how this year could be like a big year for video game adaptations, and that really didn't come. Right, I mean, we're talking about the disappointment of Halo, and yeah, it really wasn't like the big video adaptation year that we thought it might be. A lot of disappointments that we've already spoke about, but that's part of the fun, right? You know, you never know what's in store. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Christian, and Porfirio.